I'm a 20-year-old college student, living in a cozy apartment just off campus in a small town called Willow Creek with my two roommates, Sarah and Emma. They're always teasing me about staying home with pizza while they're out on dates. And honestly, I got tired of being the boring one. So, I decided to give online dating a try. I signed up for a site called Connexsphere, but I had strict rules. The guy had to be good-looking, have plenty of photos, and share at least 2 interests with me, like hiking or old horror movies. I wasn't about to meet just anyone. Within a few days, I was chatting with 2 guys. One claimed to be a 20-year-old med student, hard to believe, but he seemed genuine. The other, who I'll call Jake, said he worked as a landscaper. His profile was full of pictures of him in flannel shirts, standing in gardens or parks, with a warm smile that made me feel at ease. Jake was easier to trust than the med student, who seemed too polished, almost fake. One evening, while Sarah and Emma were giving me grief about never going out, Jake messaged me on the app, asking if I wanted to grab dinner at a place called the Rusty Lantern, a diner just 15 minutes from Willow Creek. I hesitated, but their teasing pushed me over the edge. I said yes. I told my roommates everything, where I was going, who I was meeting, and set up a safety plan. If they texted me to check in, I'd reply with sunshine if everything was fine. If I sent rain, it meant I needed an escape. No code word? They'd call the police. I spent extra time getting ready, twisting my hair into a neat bun with loose strands framing my glasses, slipping into a cream-colored blouse and dark jeans. I felt confident, maybe even a little excited, as I drove to the diner, the summer air warm through my open car window. When I pulled into the gravel lot of the Rusty Lantern, I spotted Jake right away, leaning against a lamppost outside the entrance. He wore a navy button-up and jeans, looking exactly like his photos, which was a relief. His eyes brightened when he saw me, and he crossed the lot with a grin. We stood outside for a bit, the evening breeze carrying the scent of fried onions from the diner. He was polite, asking about my drive, and we laughed about the quirky neon sign flickering above the door. Inside, we slid into a vinyl booth, the hum of chatter and clinking dishes around us. Dinner was nice burgers and fries, but Jake was dull. He talked about his landscaping job, how he liked planting trees, but his voice lacked spark. He asked about my classes, my hobbies, but it felt like small talk with a distant cousin. When Sarah texted to check in, I sent sunshine because, while boring, Jake seemed harmless. The date ended with a polite hug, and I drove home, disappointed but relieved it was over. I decided Jake wasn't worth a second date. His life seemed too plain, too predictable, and I wanted someone with a bit more fire. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing like a trapped bee, nearly falling off my nightstand. Dozens of messages from Jake lit up the screen. At first, they were sweet, saying how much he enjoyed our date, how he couldn't wait to see me again. But as I scrolled, my stomach twisted. The messages turned angry, accusing me of ignoring him, calling me names I won't repeat. It was only 7 in the morning. I'd been asleep. Furious, I texted back, explaining I'd been sleeping and that I wasn't interested in another date. His reply was a single line, "You'll regret this." I shivered, my fingers hovering over the block button. Before I could, another message appeared, "Watch your back." My heart raced, but I blocked him on Connexsphere and the messaging app, deleted my profile, and tried to shake it off. He didn't know where I lived, right? Later that day, as I sat on our couch, a text from an unknown number popped up. "You look cute in those gray sweats." My breath caught. I was wearing gray sweatpants, lounging in our living room. I bolted to the window, peering through the blinds. Across the street, I caught a glimpse of Jake sprinting down the sidewalk, his navy jacket flapping. How did he get my number? My address? I blocked the number, my hand shaking, but I couldn't calm down. The apartment felt too small, the walls closing in. That night, I tried to sleep, but my phone buzzed again, waking me from a shallow doze. Another unknown number. Dozens of texts flooded in, each one worse than the last. You can't hide. I know where you sleep. You're mine. My pulse hammered in my ears as I showed the messages to Sarah and Emma. They urged me to go to the police, but I hesitated, thinking maybe he'd stop if I kept blocking him. I was wrong. I blocked the new number, but an hour later, another barrage came from yet another number. Unable to take it, I grabbed my keys and drove to the Willow Creek police station at dawn. The streets eerily quiet. At the station, the officer was kind but unhelpful, saying they couldn't do much without proof. Jake was physically threatening me. They suggested I keep blocking the numbers and document everything. Defeated, I returned home, the weight of his words pressing on me. For a few days, the text stopped and I dared to hope it was over. Then, the pictures started. My phone pinged with images of my apartment building, taken from the street. Then, a photo of me through our kitchen window, sipping coffee. Another showed my car, parked outside my part-time job at a bookstore. Each image was a violation, proof he was watching, waiting. My skin crawled, and I barely slept, jumping at every creak in the apartment. I went back to the police, my phone heavy with evidence. This time, they took me seriously, and I got a restraining order against Jake. The messages stopped, but the fear didn't. Every shadow outside my window, every unfamiliar car on our street, made me flinch. I deleted all my dating profiles and swore off online dating for good. Even now, months later, I check the locks twice before bed, wondering if Jake's still out there, watching from the dark. When I was 6 or 7, I lived with my grandmother in a small house on the edge of Pine Hollow, a quiet town surrounded by cornfields and woods. Our street, Maple Lane, was a sleepy stretch of old homes, and our next-door neighbor, a man I'll call Harold, was in his 60s, wiry and always jogging through the neighborhood in faded sweatbands. He seemed fit for his age, his face weathered like old leather, and my grandmother liked him well enough. She'd invite him over for coffee, and they'd chat about town gossip or the weather, their voices drifting through the screen door. I didn't think much of him at first. He was just the old guy next door who waved when I played in the yard. But one summer evening, everything changed. My bedroom window overlooked Harold's backyard, a patchy lawn with a rusty swing set and a wooden deck chair. I was kneeling on my bed, drawing with crayons, when I glanced outside. Harold was sprawled in that chair, his jogging shorts hiked up, doing something that made my stomach churn. He was touching himself, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes closed. I was too young to fully understand, but I knew it was wrong, like catching someone stealing. I froze, my crayon hovering over the paper, then ducked below the windowsill, my heart racing. I told myself he hadn't seen me, that it was a mistake. The next morning, I yanked open my curtains, hoping it was a bad dream. But there he was again, in the same chair, repeating the same act. This time, he looked up, his eyes locking onto mine. A slow, crooked smile spread across his face, and he didn't stop. My breath caught, and I stumbled back, letting the curtains fall. I wanted to tell my grandmother, but fear stopped me. What if she thought I was making it up? What if Harold got angry? So, I kept quiet, avoiding my window, but the image of his smile burned into my mind. Over the next few weeks, it became a ritual. Almost every day, I'd catch him in his yard, always in that chair, always watching my window. He started making it impossible to ignore. He'd mow his lawn shirtless, his eyes flicking toward my room, or bang on a metal bucket, the noise sharp enough to draw me to the curtains. Once, I heard him call my name my real name, not a nickname, his voice low and teasing, like he knew I was listening. My skin crawled, and I started sleeping with a pillow over my head, trying to block out the world. I began noticing other things about Harold. His jogging routes seemed to circle our house more often, his sneakers scuffing the pavement late at night. Sometimes I'd hear the creak of our front gate, followed by silence as if someone was standing in our yard, watching. I'd lie awake, clutching my stuffed rabbit, too scared to check. My grandmother didn't notice. She was busy with work and thought Harold was harmless, just a lonely old man. But I knew better. His smiles weren't friendly. They were hungry, like a wolf eyeing a lamb. The worst came on my 7th birthday, the 10th of July. My grandmother threw a small party, inviting neighbors, including Harold. The house was full of laughter, the smell of chocolate cake, and kids running around. I tried to enjoy it, but Harold's presence loomed like a storm cloud. He showed up in tight, shiny cycling shorts that left nothing to the imagination. His grin too wide, his eyes too fixed on me. I stayed close to my grandmother, gripping her hand, but he found me alone in the kitchen when I went for a glass of water. The door swung open, and there he was, his shadow stretching across the linoleum. He stepped closer, his breath sour with coffee, and said, "If you were my kid, I'd never let you out of my sight, looking so pretty." His voice was low, almost a whisper, and he added, "Thanks for keeping our little secret." My mouth went dry. I mumbled something about pretty being a bad word and backed toward the counter, my hands trembling. He reached for his shorts, tugging at the waistband, and I panicked, shouting for my grandmother. She burst in just as he adjusted his clothes, his face shifting to innocence, but she saw enough. Her eyes narrowed, and she grabbed my arm, pulling me behind her. That night, she called the police. They came, took a report, and gave Harold a warning, but it felt like a slap on the wrist. I never saw him in his yard again, but the damage was done. For the next 6 years, we lived next door, and I never felt safe. I'd catch glimpses of him through his window, his silhouette pacing, or see his car slow as it passed our house. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle in the bushes, made me think he was there, waiting. I stopped playing outside, kept my curtains drawn, and checked the locks before bed. Even now, years later, I wonder what he was capable of, and the memory of his smile still wakes me in a cold sweat. I'm in my late 20s, living with my wife, Lily, and our newborn daughter, Sophie, in a third-floor apartment in the small city of Crestwood. Our place is on Elm Street, in a decent neighborhood with tree-lined sidewalks, though it's bordered by rougher areas where sirens aren't uncommon at night. I work the graveyard shift midnight to 8 in the morning at a warehouse, which leaves me exhausted most days. Sophie was only a month old in late July, and the heat was unbearable, even with our one-window-mounted air conditioner humming in the master bedroom. All three of us slept there to stay cool, the rest of the apartment like an oven. To catch a breeze, I often left the sliding glass door to our balcony wide open, 40 feet above the ground, with only a flimsy screen between us and the outside world. That night, the 20th of July, I was in rough shape. A fever had hit me hard, turning my muscles to mush and my skin clammy. I'd barely slept 10 hours that whole month, between work and caring for Sophie. I stumbled into the living room to get dressed for my shift, but my arms felt like lead, and every step sent a wave of dizziness through me. I couldn't do it. I called in sick, collapsed onto the couch, and let the fever drag me into a haze of nightmares dark, disjointed dreams of shadows moving just out of sight. I woke up drenched in sweat, the clock showing I'd only been out for 30 minutes. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of the air conditioner and the faint city noise filtering through the open balcony door. As I tried to drift back to sleep, a strange sound pulled me awake, a rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on wood, close enough to feel personal. It wasn't loud, but it seemed to come from everywhere, disorienting my fever-addled brain. I sat up, straining to listen, my pulse quickening. The tapping stopped, then started again, closer now, almost like it was on the balcony. I checked the video monitor on the coffee table. Sophie was sleeping peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling. Relieved, I sank back into the couch, convincing myself it was just the building settling or a neighbor's noise. But then it came again, sharper, more deliberate. My skin prickled, and I stood, moving toward the balcony door, the scream barely visible in the dark. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a faint rustling, like fabric brushing against itself. I froze, my heart pounding, and peered into the night. The balcony was empty, but the air felt heavy, like someone was watching. I shook it off, blaming the fever, and returned to the couch, pulling a blanket over me. Minutes later, Sophie's cries pierced the silence, hungry and insistent. I dragged myself to the kitchen to make a bottle, my head throbbing. Lily emerged from the bedroom, startled to see me home. She gasped, and I turned to reassure her, my eyes catching the living room and balcony beyond. That's when I saw a shadow dropping from the roof onto our balcony, followed by a man dressed in black, landing with a predator's grace. My fevered brain screamed, and all I could manage was a guttural yell as I sprinted toward the open door. The screen was unlocked, useless against him, and he was inches from stepping inside. He must have heard my shout or seen me charging, because he scrambled back, climbing the exterior wall like a spider, vanishing onto the roof. My legs shook as I slammed the glass door shut and locked it, my breath ragged. Lily ran to call the police, her voice trembling as she spoke to the dispatcher. I stared at the balcony, my mind racing. How had he gotten up there? The building was 3 stories high, with no fire escape nearby. And why our apartment? The thought of Sophie, so vulnerable in her crib, made my stomach lurch. While we waited for the police, I noticed a black duffel bag left on the balcony, half hidden in the shadows. When the officers arrived, they opened it, and I wish they hadn't. Inside were zip ties, duct tape, a coil of rope, a disposable camera, a large hunting knife with a serrated edge, and other items I can't bring myself to name. The sight of them turned my fever into ice, the reality sinking in. He hadn't come to rob us. His intentions were far worse, and if I hadn't stayed home, nothing would have stopped him from reaching Lily and Sophie. The police searched the roof and surrounding area, but found no trace of him. They took the bag as evidence, but the case went cold. We moved out a month later, unable to feel safe in that apartment. Even now, in our new place, I check the locks obsessively and keep the balcony door shut, no matter how hot it gets. At night, I sometimes wake to the memory of that shadow dropping from the roof, wondering if he's still out there, waiting for another chance. My husband, Tom, and I moved into a charming house on Cedar Lane in the quiet town of Brookhaven 9 months ago. It's a cozy neighborhood with tidy lawns and friendly waves, perfect for starting our life together. At first, the neighbors seemed normal, smiling as we unloaded boxes, offering casseroles to welcome us. But the woman living directly across the street, who I'll call Margaret, quickly turned our new home into a place of dread. She was in her 50s, with stringy gray hair and a habit of watching everything from her porch, her eyes sharp and unblinking. It started on the 12th of May, Mother's Day. Tom and I were heading out for brunch, the morning air warm with the scent of blooming lilacs. As we climbed into our car, Margaret called out from her driveway, wishing me a happy Mother's Day. I smiled, returning the sentiment, but she started crossing the street toward us, her steps quick and purposeful. Not wanting to be rude, but pressed for time, I rolled down my window and said we'd chat later. Her face twisted, and she erupted, shouting curses and flailing her arms like a marionette gone wild. Tom pulled out of the driveway, her voice echoing behind us. I brushed it off as a bad day, but unease settled in my gut. When we returned that afternoon, our front yard was a mess. 3 of our 4 decorative planters, ceramic pots on stone pedestals by the porch, were toppled, dirt and flowers strewn across the grass. Margaret stood at the edge of her driveway, silent, her eyes locked on us. Her stare felt like a physical weight, cold and intrusive. We didn't confront her. Instead, we went to the hardware store, bought new planters, and ordered 6 Wi-Fi security cameras to mount in our windows. As we cleaned up and set the new pots, Margaret dragged a folding chair to her driveway and sat, watching us without a word. Her presence was suffocating, like a storm cloud hovering just overhead. A neighbor, an older man named Mr. Jenkins, approached us while we worked. He apologized, saying the landlord should have warned us about Margaret. Apparently, she had a history of lashing out when she felt ignored or disrespected. I told him we weren't here for her entertainment, and she needed to stay away from our property. Margaret retreated inside when we began installing the cameras, but the next morning, as we left for work, she was back, standing in her nightgown at her driveway's edge, arms crossed, staring. When we returned that evening, the new planters were shifted slightly, as if someone had tried to push them over. The camera footage showed 2 girls, maybe 6 and 8, sneaking over from Margaret's house. They shoved at the pots, gave up, and ran back. We weighted the planters with rocks and called the police to document the incident, hoping to build a case if things escalated. For 2 months, Margaret's behavior grew obsessive. Every time we left or returned, she'd rush outside, sometimes in her robe, sometimes barefoot, her eyes tracking us like a hawk. We ignored her, sensing she thrived on attention, but it was clear she was unstable. One evening, she parked her car across our driveway, blocking us in. We called the police, who made her move it, but they did nothing else, advising us to keep records. A week later, she did it again, earning a ticket, but it didn't stop her. She started pulling up in her car just before we got home, no matter the hour 6 in the evening or midnight, stepping out to watch us as we parked. The predictability was chilling, like she knew our schedule down to the minute. We tried using a back entrance to our subdivision, winding through Oakwood Drive, and it worked for a week. Then, one night, she was there, parked at the entrance, her headlights glaring. She followed us in, her car tailing ours through the quiet streets. My heart pounded as I gripped Tom's hand, and I started recording her with my phone, the red taillights glowing in the footage. Things got worse the following month. On the 3rd of August, I came home for lunch and found a massive delivery truck blocking our driveway. The driver, a burly man with a scowl, said he was visiting Margaret and refused to move. I warned him I'd call the police, and he reluctantly pulled away, only to roll back once I parked. Furious, I contacted the police and the trucking company. The owner apologized, saying the truck shouldn't have been in a residential area, and the driver was ticketed and arrested for unrelated warrants. Margaret was livid. She ran to our driveway, screaming about how we betrayed her by reporting her friend, her voice shrill and unhinged. I recorded her outburst, and when she saw my phone, she stormed back to her house. The police came, took another report, and warned her to stay off our property, but she scoffed, claiming we didn't own the house and she could go wherever she wanted. A week later, on the 10th of August, a group of kids, maybe 10 or 12 years old, swarmed our front lawn, fighting and throwing trash. Margaret sat on her porch, egging them on, yelling for them to be louder. The police dismissed it as kids playing, even after we showed them the video, and gave her yet another warning she ignored. The next day, with the temperature at 40 degrees, she stood in the middle of the street in a thin dress, staring at our house as we left for work. She was there again that evening, and every day after, including this morning, her silhouette a constant shadow in our lives. With 3 months left on our lease, we're planning to move, but until then, we're trapped in this nightmare. We keep the cameras rolling, save every video, and call the police for every incident, but they've done little to stop her. At night, I lie awake, wondering if she's outside, watching through our windows. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the gravel outside, too soft to be sure, and I check the cameras, my heart racing. Margaret's obsession feels like a noose tightening, and I fear what she'd do before we escape Cedar Lane. I'm 20 years old, living in a small basement apartment in the rural town of Ravenwood, a place so quiet you can hear the wind whisper through the pines. My apartment is beneath a creaky old house owned by a standoffish older woman named Mrs. Larson, who lives upstairs. The house sits at the end of a gravel road called Hollow Lane, a kilometer from the main highway, surrounded by dense woods and open fields. A steep, leafy slope drops off just 5 meters from my entrance, where a small porch juts out, mostly used for smoking or catching the evening breeze. The woods beyond are thick, untouched, with no trails or reason for anyone to wander there, especially at night. I moved here in the fall of 2015, chasing independence after leaving my mom's place, but Ravenwood's eerie stillness took some getting used to. In May of 2016, my boyfriend, Ethan, moved in with me from the city of Brightvale, about 2 hours away. His friend Clara offered to help with the move, driving a van full of his stuff. Because of her work schedule, we didn't leave Brightvale until 11 at night, and roadwork delayed us further. By the time we reached Ravenwood, it was 1 in the morning on the 15th of May, the town silent as a graveyard. The gravel crunched under our tires as we pulled up to the house, the headlights cutting through the dark. I grabbed a couple of bags from the van and headed around the house to my basement door, my footsteps loud in the stillness. As I stepped onto the porch, a strange sound stopped me cold, a rhythmic rustling from the woods down the slope, like someone walking through dry leaves, deliberate and steady. I stood there, bags in hand, my breath shallow. Ravenwood was too quiet for random wanderers, and those woods weren't a place for late-night strolls. The rustling had a cadence, almost purposeful, as if someone was pacing just out of sight. Ethan came up behind me, noticing my stillness, and Clara paused too. I whispered about the sound, and we all listened, the air thick with tension. Clara shrugged it off, suggesting it was a neighbor's kid or an animal. But the nearest house was half a kilometer away, and no one let their kids roam at this hour. We laughed nervously, blaming our imaginations, and hauled the rest of Ethan's stuff inside, locking the door behind us. But the sound lingered in my mind, a puzzle I couldn't solve. A week later, on the 22nd of May, Ethan and I were on the porch around 1 in the morning, sharing a cigarette under the dim glow of a single bulb. The air was cool, smelling of pine and damp earth, when the rustling returned, clearer this time, coming from the same spot down the slope. We froze, the cigarette burning forgotten between my fingers. The leaves crunched in that same steady rhythm, closer now, maybe 10 meters away. We joked about it being a ghost or a stray dog, but my laughter felt forced, my pulse quickening. Ravenwood was too safe for this, wasn't it? We stubbled out the cigarette and hurried inside, locking the door, the darkness outside feeling alive, watchful. The next week, on the 29th of May, the sound came again, same time, same place. I realized it was always on a Sunday, always around 1 in the morning, a pattern that made my skin crawl. Ethan and I stood on the porch, listening as the rustling grew louder, more aggressive, like someone was stomping through the leaves. We tried to laugh it off, making up stories about a hermit in the woods, but the humor died when we heard a twig snap, sharp and close. We retreated inside, my hand shaking as I turned the deadbolt, the safety of Ravenwood feeling like a lie. The following Sunday, the 5th of June, I stayed inside, too uneasy to smoke on the porch. Ethan went out alone, insisting it was nothing. Minutes later, he burst through the door, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. He whispered that the rustling was back, closer than ever, almost at the edge of the slope. I followed him outside, my heart pounding, and stood on the porch, listening. The sound was unmistakable leaves crunching, faster now, like someone was climbing toward us. I shouted into the dark, my voice trembling. "Very funny. I'm calling the cops." We laughed, trying to scare off whatever it was, but the rustling stopped instantly, the silence heavier than before. Then it started again, louder, faster, a frantic scrambling up the slope. My blood ran cold. It sounded like someone sprinting straight for us, leaves sliding under heavy steps. Ethan and I bolted inside, slamming the door and locking it, cigarettes still clutched in our hands. We turned off the lights and dropped to the floor, my chest tight with panic. The porch creaked under the weight of footsteps, slow and deliberate, like boots pacing just outside. I held my breath, terrified the intruder could hear my heartbeat. Ethan's eyes were wide, his hand gripping mine as we stared at the door, waiting for it to burst open. The house's layout made it worse. My apartment was half underground, with the upstairs at street level, but the back looked like a two-story drop. The living room, fully below ground, had a small window near the ceiling, showing only a flower bed and a bush. As we crouched in the dock, I glanced at that window and froze. A pair of worn, muddy boots stood in the flower bed, motionless, the toes pointed toward the glass. My stomach twisted, and I nudged Ethan, pointing. He saw them too, his face draining of color. The boots didn't move, but their presence was a threat, proof someone was hunting us. I wondered if they even knew we were in the basement, or if they thought we'd fled upstairs to Mrs. Larson's part of the house. We crawled to the bathroom, the only room with a lock, and barricaded ourselves inside, sitting on the cold tile, too scared to speak. Without our phones, we had no way to call for help, and the minutes stretched into eternity. My mind raced. Had they followed us from Brightvale? Was it a local, someone who knew the house's layout? The silence outside was worse than the rustling, a void that hid their next move. After what felt like hours, we crept to the living room, piling sofa cushions against the window to block any view. I called my mom, waking her at 2 a.m, and explained everything, my voice shaking. She was annoyed but told us to call the police if we felt it was serious. Exhausted and convinced the intruder was gone, we didn't. Ravenwood's safety had lulled us into complacency, a mistake I'll never make again. A week later, on the 12th of June, we moved out, unable to stay in a place where the woods felt alive with malice. We never saw the intruder's face, only those boots, but their memory haunts me. At night, I still hear the rustling in my dreams, and I check every window, wondering if they're out there, waiting for me to step onto another porch. I'm a 20-year-old waitress at a lively diner called the Silver Spoon in the bustling town of Fairmont. It's a popular spot, all checkered floors and neon signs, where I serve burgers and milkshakes to a mix of college kids, families, and late-night stragglers. As a young woman working the night shift, I'm used to dealing with the occasional creepy customer guys who ask for my number or linger too long at their tables, their eyes following me. I've learned to smile, deflect, and keep moving, never letting them get under my skin. But one night, on the 5th of March, a man walked into the diner who changed everything, turning my workplace into a place of dread. It was around 8 p.m, the diner humming with chatter and the clatter of dishes. I was working the floor alone, my coworkers busy in the kitchen or on break. A man in his 40s sat at one of my tables, alone, his leather jacket creased and his face shadowed by a day-old beard. His eyes were cold, distant, and he barely looked at me when I greeted him with my usual cheer, asking about his day. He grunted, ordering a coffee and a plate of fries without so much as a smile. I figured he was just tired, maybe having a rough night, so I left him alone, checking on him only to refill his mug. He ate quickly, paid in cash, and when I brought his change, he grabbed my wrist, his grip tight and sudden. Leaning close, his breath hot with coffee, he whispered, "I want you so bad." His voice was low, almost a growl, and his eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. I froze, my heart racing until he let go and walked out, the bell above the door jingling as he vanished into the night. I stood there, my wrist tingling, the diner's noise fading into a dull roar. I told my coworkers, Mia and Jess, what happened, and they were outraged. urging me to report it to our manager. But I brushed it off, not wanting to make a scene. By the time my shift ended at midnight, I'd almost forgotten about him, chalking it up to another weird encounter. The Silver Spoon closes at midnight on weekdays, and by 1:30 in the morning, I was ready to head home. I always park right outside the front doors, my little blue hatchback just 5 feet from the entrance, so I feel safe walking out alone. I carry a stun gun in my purse, a habit from growing up in a city, but I rarely need it. That night, most of my coworkers had left, and the few still cleaning were too busy to walk me out. I didn't mind the lot was well lit, and my car was close. I locked the diner's door behind me, the night air cool against my skin, and slid into my car, locking the doors out of instinct. My phone was dead, and the cheap charger in my car only worked if I jiggled it just right. I was fumbling with it, cursing under my breath, when headlights flared behind me. A silver pickup truck pulled up, blocking my car against the diner's front wall. I couldn't back out, couldn't pull forward. At first, I thought it was my roommate Tara, who sometimes checks on me if I'm out late. She drives a silver truck, but as I turned, my stomach dropped. It wasn't her truck. The model was older, the grille dented, the paint chipped. The driver started honking, a relentless blare that echoed in the empty lot, over and over, for what felt like forever. My pulse hammered as I gripped the steering wheel, refusing to get out. I'm not stupid. I knew better than to confront a stranger in a dark parking lot. The truck lurched forward, then pulled alongside me, the driver's window rolling down. It was him, the man from earlier, his face now twisted with anger, his eyes glinting in the streetlight. He banged on my window, shouting for me to get out, his voice muffled but furious. My breath caught as I recognized the leather jacket, the same cold stare. He'd been waiting for hours in the lot, watching for me to leave. My phone wouldn't turn on, the charger useless, and panic clawed at my chest. I shifted into reverse, my hand shaking, and floored it, scraping past his truck with a screech of metal. He lunged back into his cab and peeled out after me, his headlights flooding my rearview mirror. The streets of Fairmont were nearly empty, the traffic lights glowing red in the dark. I ran a red light, my heart in my throat, speeding through the quiet town, weaving through side streets to lose him. He stopped at the light, his truck shrinking in my mirror, but I didn't slow down. I took a long, winding route home, circling unfamiliar neighborhoods, checking for his headlights. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, I scanned my car for damage, half expecting to find a dent or a note, but there was nothing. I locked my apartment door, double-checked the deadbolt, and sank onto the couch, my stun gun clutched in my lap. I couldn't shake the image of his face, the way he'd waited 5 hours, patient as a predator, for me to step into his trap. I don't know if he wanted to rob me, hurt me, or worse, but the thought of him out there, maybe still watching, keeps me up at night. I've started packing farther from the diner, where the lot is busier, and I never walk out alone. Every silver truck I see makes my stomach lurch, and I wonder if he's still in Fairmont, waiting for another chance to find me. I'm a travel agent in my late 30s, working for a well-known tour company in the city of Northvale. My job involves booking dream vacations, and sometimes I get to experience them myself through familiarization trips offered by cruise lines. On the 20th of December, 2 weeks before the holidays, my boss offered me a spot on a 4-night cruise to the sunny shores of Costa Verde, departing the day after Christmas. My husband, Mark, had a fishing trip planned with his buddies, and our 7-year-old daughter, Ellie, was thrilled to stay with her grandparents. It seemed perfect, a chance to soak up some warmth while Northvale shivered in single-digit temperatures. I booked my flight, packed my swimsuits, and boarded the ship, the Ocean Whisper, on the 26th of December, ready for a few days of sand and sea. The embarkation in Port Solaro was seamless, the air thick with salt and excitement. My balcony cabin was a dream, with a view of endless turquoise waves and a breeze that smelled of freedom. That first night, I dressed up for dinner in the ship's elegant dining room, the chandeliers casting a golden glow over white tablecloths. I took a seat at a communal table, expecting to chat with fellow travelers. A man in his late 20s, dressed in a crisp linen shirt, sat beside me, even though several chairs were empty. His name was Vikram, and he introduced himself with a polished smile, saying he was traveling with his parents and sister's family. He'd worked in tech, had studied in London, and spoke with a charming accent. I mentioned my husband and daughter early on, keeping things friendly but clear. We talked about the ports of call and Costa Verde's beaches, and when his family joined us, we parted ways. I assumed I'd never see him again. The next day, the 27th of December, the ship docked at Puerto Palma. I signed up for a coastal bike tour, pedaling along cliffs with the ocean crashing below. At the meeting point, I spotted Vikram with an older man, likely his father, and a teenage boy, probably his nephew. He waved, his smile too eager, and we exchanged small talk before the tour began. Afterward, I wandered the town's market, browsing stalls of woven bags and sampling mango empanadas. A prickling sensation crept up my neck, like I was being watched. I turned, scanning the crowd, but saw no one familiar. The feeling lingered, a shadow trailing me through the cobblestone streets, but I shook it off and returned to the ship. Back on board, I changed into my swimsuit and headed to the sun deck, the air a perfect 72 degrees. I stretched out on a lounger, the sun warming my skin, and slipped on my wireless earbuds, letting music drown out the chatter of other passengers. I was dozing, the rhythm of the waves lulling me, when a rough shake jolted me upright. Vikram loomed over me, his face twisted in a scowl, his eyes dark with anger. He leaned close, his voice sharp, accusing me of disrespecting him and his culture by flaunting myself in a swimsuit. My cheeks burned with shock and embarrassment. Two crew members, friends I'd met on past cruises, rushed over, their faces stunned as they told him to back off. Furious, I stood, wrapping my towel around me, and said my personal choices were none of his business. He stormed off, muttering that I'd regret it if I were his. I reported the incident to the cruise director, shaken but hoping it was a one-off. The next day, the 28th of December, was blissfully calm. The ship was at sea, and I spent the morning on my balcony, reading and watching dolphins trail the ship. Vikram was nowhere in sight, and I began to relax, the ocean's vastness soothing my nerves. That evening, after a few cocktails at the ship's piano bar, I returned to my cabin, the hum of the engines a steady comfort. I called Mark via the ship's Wi-Fi, laughing about Ellie's antics at her grandparents'. Exhausted, I slipped into my pajamas and was drifting off when a violent shudder woke me. The cabin door was shaking, as if someone was slamming their body against it. My heart leaped to my throat. I threw on a robe and crept to the door, my hands trembling as I peered through the peephole. Vikram stood there, his face flushed, eyes wild, dressed in a formal tuxedo from the ship's gala night. He pounded the door, his fists relentless, shouting words I couldn't make out but felt like threats. The hallway was dim, his shadow stretching long and distorted. I backed away, my breath shallow, when the man in the cabin across from mine, a burly father traveling with his kids, opened his door. He yelled at Vikram to leave, threatening to call security. Vikram gave one last glare at my door and fled, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. I sank to the floor, my pulse racing, the door's lock suddenly feeling flimsy. The next morning, the 29th of December, the man across the hall pulled me aside as I headed to breakfast. His face was grim as he told me he'd seen Vikram holding a steak knife the night before, its blade glinting in the hallway light. My stomach churned, the image of that knife slicing through my fragile sense of safety. I reported it to the cruise director, who promised to investigate, but I never heard what came of it. The rest of the cruise, I stayed on guard, avoiding the dining room and sticking to crowded areas. I only saw Vikram once more, on the 30th of December as we disembarked in Port Solara. He was carrying a young girl, likely his niece, and didn't notice me. I slipped into the crowd, my heart pounding, grateful to escape his gaze. Back in North Vale, I couldn't shake the fear that clung to me like damp fog. The memory of Vikram's rage, the knife, the shaking door, felt like one of the eerie encounters you'd shared in your ghost stories, where the threat lingers long after the moment passes. I check my locks twice now, and when I book cruises for clients, I warn solo travelers to trust their instincts. I still wonder what Vikram might have done if that door had given way, and the thought keeps me up at night. The ocean's lullaby now a distant, haunted echo. I'm a 24-year-old woman living alone in a small duplex on Pine Hollow Road, a quiet street in the rural town of Ashwick, where the nearest neighbor is a half-mile away, and the nights are so still you can hear your own heartbeat. I work from home as a freelance illustrator. My days spent sketching at a desk by a large bay window that overlooks a tangled backyard sloping into a dense forest. The house is old, its wooden floors creaking underfoot, but it's cheap. And the solitude suits me, or it did, until the 15th of October, when the forest started watching me back. It began with a feeling, subtle but persistent, like a draft you can't trace. I was working late, my desk lamp casting a warm glow against the window's black reflection, my pencil scratching out a book cover design. Around midnight, my cat, Juniper, froze mid-stretch, her eyes fixed on the glass, pupils wide as moons. I followed her gaze, expecting a moth or a stray leaf, but the backyard was empty, the forest beyond a wall of shadow. Then, a faint tap, sharp, deliberate, like a fingernail on the window pane. My heart skipped, and I stood, my chair scraping the floor. The tapping stopped, the silence heavier than before, pressing against my ears. I checked the locks, closed the blinds, and told myself it was a branch, though no trees grew close enough to touch the house. The next night, the 16th of October, it happened again. I was sketching, Juniper curled on the couch, when the tap returned, slower, more rhythmic, like someone testing my nerve. I didn't look this time, afraid of what I'd see, but Juniper's low growl pulled me to the window. I eased the blind aside, my breath shallow, and saw nothing, just the dark, the grass silver under a half moon. But the tapping continued, now from the back door, a glass slider that led to the yard. My pulse hammered as I grabbed a kitchen knife, its weight cold in my hand, and crept to the door. The glass was black, reflecting my own wide-eyed face, but beyond it, the forest felt alive, its shadow shifting just out of sight. I locked the door, though it was already secure, and backed away, Juniper hissing at my feet. By the 17th of October, I was unraveling. I'd barely slept, jumping at every creak, my sketches piling up unfinished. I installed a motion sensor light in the backyard, its harsh beam a frail defense against the dark. That evening, as I microwaved dinner, the light snapped on, flooding the yard. I rushed to the slider, knife in hand, and saw the gate at the yard's edge swinging open, its latch undone. No wind stirred the air, no animal scurried past, just the gate, creaking on its hinges, beckoning to the forest. I locked the slider, my hands trembling, and checked the cheap security camera I'd set up that morning. The footage was grainy, but it showed the gate opening alone. No hands, no figure. Just a nothing, as if the forest itself had reached out and pulled it wide. Sleep became a memory. On the 18th of October, I found something worse. In the backyard, near the gate, was a small pile of bones, tiny, fragile, like a bird's, arranged in a perfect circle, tied with a red thread. My stomach churned. No animal would do that. No wind could be so precise. I swept them away, my hands shaking, but the image lingered, sharp as a blade. That night, the tapping returned, louder, insistent, circling the house window. Door, window again, like a predator pacing its cage. I called the Ashwick police, my voice breaking, but they were 40 minutes away, and when they arrived, they found nothing. No bones, no footprints, just my fear, raw and exposed. They suggested a raccoon or a prank, their flashlights useless against the forest's black heart, and left me alone with the night. On the 20th of October, I found a photograph slipped under my front door, old and faded, showing a woman who looked like me, same eyes, same hair, standing by my duplex, her face blank, her hands clutching a red thread. The house in the photo was younger, the paint fresh, but it was mine, unmistakable. My knees buckled. I hadn't taken it, hadn't seen it before, and no one knew I lived here except my clients. All online, all distant. The camera caught nothing that night, its lens blind to the forest's secrets. But the tapping grew frantic, joined by a low hum, like a voice too soft to hear, whispering my name from the trees. I couldn't stay. On the 22nd of October, I packed a bag, grabbed Juniper, and drove to a motel in the next town, the highway stretching like a lifeline. But the fear followed. At the motel, my phone pinged with an email from an unknown address. No text, just a photo of me sleeping in my bed, my face peaceful, unaware, taken from above. The red thread draped across my pillow. My scream woke the neighbors, but the police found no trace, no hack, no clue. I moved again, to a city apartment, high above the streets, but I don't sleep. Every tap, every shadow, is the forest, the bones, the woman who wasn't me. I check the locks, clutch the knife, and wonder if she's still out there, waiting for me to come home. At 22, I left my hometown in the Midwest to start a new job in the rolling hills of Greenvale, a small town in Virginia. I had a shiny new car, a cozy apartment on Willow Street, and a fresh sense of independence, but no friends or family nearby. This was before cell phones were common, so my landline was my only link to the outside world. If it rang, I expected my mom, my sister, or my long-distance boyfriend Nate, still finishing college back home. I'd only been in Greenvale for 2 weeks, settling into my routine as a receptionist at a local clinic, when the calls began on the 5th of June, turning my new beginning into a nightmare. It started innocently enough. I was cooking dinner spaghetti sizzling in a pan when the phone rang. I wiped my hands and picked up, expecting Nate's familiar voice. Instead, a man's voice, smooth and friendly, asked what I was up to. I hesitated, thinking it might be a cousin or an uncle from my big extended family, someone I hadn't placed yet. I asked who it was, and his tone shifted, growing sharp, almost mocking. "You know who this is, sweetheart," he said, a chill creeping into his words. My stomach tightened. I laughed nervously, assuming he dialed the wrong number, and told him so. Then he recited my phone number, unlisted, unpublished, and my full name, clear as day. My breath caught, the kitchen suddenly feeling too small. I'd only given that number to my parents, Nate, my sister, my boss, and the apartment manager. No one else. He didn't like me insisting it was a mistake. His voice turned harsh, spitting out threats of what he'd do to me, vile things that made my skin crawl. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking, and stood frozen, staring at the receiver. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was a prank, but my appetite was gone. I turned off the stove and checked the locks, the silence of the apartment now heavy with menace. Around 1 a.m, the phone rang again, shattering the quiet. It was him, angrier this time, laughing when I told him to leave me alone. I hung up, yanked the phone cord from the wall, and curled up in bed, my cat, Muffin, purring beside me. But sleep didn't come easy, the memory of his voice looping in my mind. The calls continued over the next few days, always at night, always him. I'd plugged the phone in during the day, hoping for Nate or my mom, but I dreaded the evenings. On the 8th of June, he called just as I got home from work. his voice calm but cruel. He mentioned my blue curtains, said he liked the way they matched my bedspread. My heart stopped. I spun toward my bedroom window, the curtains swaying slightly as if someone had brushed against them. He knew what was inside my apartment. I hung up, my hands trembling, and checked every window, every door, Muffin trailing me, sensing my panic. The locks were secure, but I felt exposed, like eyes were on me from every shadow. The next night, the 9th of June, it got worse. I was in the kitchen, sipping tea, trying to calm my nerves when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but fear of missing Nate made me pick up. It was him, his voice low and intimate, like he was right beside me. He talked about my fridge, listing the yogurt and apples inside, then mentioned Muffin, saying he hoped I wasn't allergic to cats like he was. My knees buckled. He'd been inside my home. I glanced at the calendar on the fridge, where I'd written Nate's visit in red marker for the 15th of June, circled with a heart. He asked if I was in love with Nate, his tone mocking, and I dropped the phone, tears streaming down my face. I sank to the floor, shaking, the apartment no longer a sanctuary, but a trap. The walls seemed to pulse with his presence, every creak a sign he was near. I didn't sleep that night, sitting against my bedroom door with a kitchen knife in hand, Muffin curled up beside me. I imagined him slipping through a window, his footsteps silent on the carpet, his breath hot against my neck. It was like one of your ghost stories from Fog Harbor, where the unseen lurks just out of reach, waiting to strike. At dawn, I dragged myself to the apartment manager's office, my eyes red and raw. I told her everything: his calls, his knowledge of my home, my fear that he'd been inside. Her face paled, and after a long pause, she admitted she suspected who it was. She explained that a maintenance worker, a man with a history of creeping on tenants, had likely targeted me, a young woman living alone. She'd caught him lingering near my unit before, his toolbox an excuse to loiter. My stomach churned. She knew he was trouble, but hadn't warned me. She promised to change my locks that day and keep the spare key herself, swearing it wouldn't happen again. I nodded numb and went to work, the clinic's bright lights doing little to chase away the dread. The calls stopped after that, but the fear didn't. I never saw the maintenance man, never knew his face, which made it worse. Every stranger in the hallway, every shadow in the parking lot, could be him. I stayed paranoid, checking my windows obsessively, jumping at every noise. I moved out when my lease ended on the 1st of December, unable to feel safe in Greenvale. Years later, I realized the manager's hesitation, her odd expression, meant this wasn't the first time. She hadn't fired him, hadn't reported him, leaving me to wonder how many others he'd terrorized. I regret not calling the police myself, too young and naive to push harder. Now, I keep my number private and my doors double locked. But the memory of his voice, so close yet faceless, still wakes me in the dark, whispering my name. When I was 22, I moved to the lively city of Ashmont for a graphic design internship, renting a room in a 3-bedroom house on Birch Avenue. I found the place through a local ad board, drawn by its cheap rent and proximity to downtown. My roommates were strangers at first. Lila, a quiet nursing student in her mid-20s, and Caleb, a 24-year-old barista with a knack for sketching. The house was old but charming, with creaky hardwood floors and tall windows that let in the golden autumn light. I felt lucky to land such a spot, but by the end of October, what started as a fresh adventure turned into a creeping dread, all because of Caleb. At first, Caleb seemed harmless, maybe a bit intense. He was tall, with messy dark hair and eyes that lingered a fraction too long, but he was friendly, always offering to share his coffee or sketch me for practice. I'd pose sometimes, flattered by the attention, and we'd laugh over his drawings, which captured my features with eerie precision. Lila kept to herself, buried in textbooks, so Caleb and I bonded over late-night talks about art and music. He'd show me his sketchbook, filled with intricate portraits, but I noticed most were of women, some strangers, some eerily familiar, their faces drawn with obsessive detail. I brushed it off as an artist's quirk, but a nagging unease settled in my chest. On the 10th of October, things took a turn. I came home from work to find Caleb in the living room, sketching furiously, his eyes darting to me as I kicked off my shoes. The air felt heavy, like I'd interrupted something private. He flipped his sketchbook shut, but not before I glimpsed a drawing of me, my face, my posture, even the scarf I'd worn that day. It was unsettlingly accurate, down to the loose strand of hair I always tucked behind my ear. I forced a smile, joking about being his muse, but his expression stayed blank, his fingers tightening on the pencil. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. The bolts click a small comfort against the growing weight of his gaze. Over the next week, Caleb's behavior shifted. He started waiting for me to get home, sitting on the couch with his sketchbook open, as if my arrival was his cue to perform. He'd follow me to the kitchen, asking about my day with a forced casualness that felt rehearsed. I'd catch him staring when he thought I wasn't looking, his eyes tracing me like he was memorizing every detail. Once, I found a sketch of me sleeping, my head tilted against the couch, my mouth slightly open, tucked into his book when he left it on the table. My skin crawled. I hadn't napped in the living room since moving in. How could he have drawn that? The question gnawed at me, but I didn't ask, afraid of what he'd say. By the 20th of October, the house felt like a maze of unseen eyes. I'd hear floorboards creak outside my room at night, soft steps that paused by my door before fading away. I'd wake to find my window slightly ajar, the latch undone, though I swore I'd locked it. Caleb began leaving gifts, small things, like a pencil sketch of a flower or a coffee mug with my initials painted on it, placed outside my door. Each one felt less like kindness and more like a claim, a reminder he was watching. I stopped posing for his drawings and avoided the living room, but it didn't help. He'd knock on my door late at night, asking if I wanted to hang out, his voice too eager, too insistent. I'd mumble excuses through the door, my heart racing, the lock my only shield. One evening, on the 25th of October, I came home late from a work event, the house dark, except for a faint glow from the basement. Lila was at the hospital for a night shift, and I assumed Caleb was out. I dropped my bag and headed to my room, but a faint rustling from the basement stopped me. The door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the hallway floor. Curiosity battled fear, but it crept closer, my pulse loud in my ears. The stairs descended into shadow, and as I peered down, I saw Caleb hunched over a table, surrounded by sketches, dozens of them, pinned to a corkboard, taped to the walls, scattered across the floor. Everyone was of me. Me laughing, me reading, me walking down Birch Avenue, me sleeping in poses I'd never taken. My breath hitched. Some sketches showed me in places I hadn't been, like a park I'd never visited, my face drawn with a longing that turned my stomach. I backed away, my foot catching on a rug, and the floor creaked. Caleb's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine through the dim light. For a moment, neither of us moved, the air thick with unspoken menace. Then he stood, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator sizing up prey. I bolted upstairs, slamming my door and locking it, my hands shaking as I pushed a chair against the knob. Footsteps followed, heavy and unhurried, stopping just outside. He didn't knock, didn't speak, but I felt his presence through the wood, a weight that pressed against my chest. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20, before the footsteps retreated, leaving me trembling in the dark. The next morning, the 26th of October, I confronted Lila when she got home, showing her a photo I'd snapped of the basement shrine before fleeing. Her face paled, and she admitted she'd seen Caleb sketching me obsessively, but thought he was just crushing harmlessly. We agreed he had to go. That day, we called the landlord, who lived across town, and explained everything. He came over, inspected the basement, and evicted Caleb on the spot, citing a lease violation for disturbing behavior. Caleb didn't argue, his face blank as he packed his things, but his eyes lingered on me, cold and unreadable, as he left on the 27th of October. Lyle and I scrubbed the house, tearing down every sketch, locking every window, but the violation lingered. I found more drawings, hidden in odd places, under my bed, taped inside a cabinet, each one a reminder of how closely he'd watched me. The landlord changed the locks, but I couldn't stay. I moved out on the 1st of November, crashing with a coworker until I found a new place. Even now, in a different city, I check my doors twice, my heart skipping at every creak. Your ghost stories, like the shadow on Fog Harbor's pier, capture that same creeping dread, where the threat feels alive, waiting. I still wonder if Caleb's out there, sketching my face from memory, biding his time. I'm a single woman in my early 30s, living alone in a small house on Orchard Lane in the sleepy town of Millhaven. The neighborhood is peaceful, with neat bungalows and wide lawns, the kind of place where people wave from their porches. My house backs onto a dense forest, a wall of pines that stretch for miles, offering privacy, but also an eerie quiet at night. I work from home as a freelance editor, my days filled with manuscripts and coffee, my evenings spent unwinding with a book or a walk around the block. I've always felt safe here, but on the 15th of August, that safety shattered when I realized someone was watching me from the shadows of my own backyard. It started around 9 at night. I was in my living room, curled up on the couch with a mystery novel, the windows open to let in the cool summer breeze. My backyard is fenced with a gate that locks, and beyond it, the forest looms, dark and impenetrable. I'd left my sliding glass door ajar, the screen closed to keep out bugs, when a faint rustling caught my ear, like leaves shifting underfoot. I paused, my finger holding my place in the book, and listened. Millhaven is quiet, but the forest is alive with deer and foxes, so I dismissed it as an animal and kept reading. But the rustling returned, closer now, deliberate, as if someone was pacing just beyond the fence. I set my book down and stood, my heart beating a little faster. I stepped to the glass door and peered through the screen. The backyard bathed in moonlight. The grass was still, the gate closed, but the forest's edge felt alive, its shadows thicker than usual. I called out, my voice sharper than I intended, asking if anyone was there. Silence answered, heavy and unnatural, like the air was holding its breath. I slid the glass door shut, locked it, and checked the front door too, my fingers lingering on the deadbolt. Back on the couch, I tried to read, but my focus was gone, the words blurring as I strained to hear any sound from outside. Around 11, I headed to bed, my bedroom window facing the backyard. I kept it cracked for fresh air, the screen secure, but as I changed into pajamas, a faint scraping noise froze me in place. It came from the fence, slow and rhythmic, like someone dragging a stick along the wood. My pulse raced, and I crept to the window, easing the blinds apart. The backyard was dark, the moon now hidden behind clouds, but I saw a shape, a tall, thin figure standing by the gate, motionless. My breath caught. It wasn't a deer or a neighbor's dog. It was human, their outlines stark against the forest's black veil. They didn't move, just stood there, as if waiting for me to notice. I backed away, my hands trembling, and grabbed my phone, dialing the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher was calm, promising to send an officer, but said it might take 30 minutes. Millhaven's small force was stretched thin. I turned on every light in the house, hoping to scare the figure off, and checked the locks again, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. The scraping stopped, but the silence was worse, a void that hid their intentions. I returned to my bedroom, phone clutched tight, and peeked through the blinds. The figure was gone. The gate still closed, but the forest seemed to pulse, its darkness swallowing the edges of my yard. When the police arrived, 2 officers, a woman and a man, searched the backyard and the forest's perimeter. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of tampering, though the grass near the gate was flattened, as if someone had stood there for a while. They suggested it might have been a curious teen or a drifter, advised me to keep my doors locked, and left me with a card. I nodded, thanking them, but their words did little to ease the knot in my stomach. I closed all the windows, the house now stuffy, and slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. The blades weigh a cold comfort. The next night, the 16th of August, I was on edge, jumping at every creak. I'd bought a motion sensor light for the backyard, its beam harsh and unforgiving. Around 10, it flicked on, flooding the yard with white light. I rushed to the glass door, my heart pounding, and saw the gate swinging open, its latch undone. No one was there, but the forest's edge seemed closer, its shadows creeping onto my lawn. I locked the gate, my hand shaking, and checked the footage from a cheap security camera I'd set up that morning. It showed the gate opening on its own. No figure, no hands, just the latch clicking free. My skin prickled. Was it the wind? A faulty lock? Or something worse toying with me? Over the next week, the intrusions grew bolder. On the 18th of August, I found a small pile of stones arranged in a circle near the fence, hidden in the grass. The camera caught nothing, its lens blind to the forest depths. On the 20th, I woke to the motion light blazing at 3 in the morning, the gate wide open again. The air felt heavy, charged, like a storm was brewing inside the trees. I stopped sleeping, my eyes ringed with exhaustion, my day spent scouring the camera footage for answers. Each night, I felt the figure's presence, unseen but close, their gaze a weight on my skin, like the chilling encounters in your Fog Harbor ghost stories, where the unseen lingers just beyond reach. On the 22nd of August, I'd had enough. I called a locksmith to reinforce the gate and bought a heavier padlock, its chain rattling as I secured it. That night, I sat in the dark, watching the backyard through the glass door, a flashlight in hand. Around midnight, the motion light snapped on, and I saw him, a man, tall and wiry, standing inside my yard, inches from the glass. His face was shadowed, but his eyes glinted, locked on mine, unblinking. He wore dark clothes, blending with the night, and held something in his hand, a small, glinting object, maybe a knife. My scream caught in my throat as I stumbled back, dialing the police with shaking fingers. He was gone by the time they arrived, the gate still locked, no sign of forced entry. The officers searched again, finding only a single footprint in the soft earth near the fence, too vague to trace. They stayed longer this time, their faces grim, and suggested I install a full security system. I did, spending money I didn't have, but it didn't matter. I moved out on the 1st of September, unable to stay in a house where the forest felt alive, watching. I still don't know who he was, a neighbor, a stranger, or something else, but I feel his eyes sometimes, even in my new apartment, as if he's waiting for me to step into the dark again. I'm a 25-year-old woman living in the small city of Laurelton, working part-time as a barista while taking online classes for a business degree. After a breakup left me feeling stuck, I decided to try meeting new people, but dating apps felt too polished, too predictable. On a whim, I browsed Craigslist personal section. Risky, I know, but I was curious about the kind of people who posted there. Most ads were weird or outright creepy, but one caught my eye on the 5th of November. A guy named Ryan, 27, described himself as a mechanic who loved hiking and old sci-fi movies, looking for someone to grab coffee and see where things go. His ad was simple, no red flags, and he included a photo, a grainy shot of a lanky guy with a shy smile, standing by a toolbox. I emailed him, half expecting no reply, but he responded within an hour, suggesting we meet at a cozy cafe called the Brewhaven in downtown Laurelton. Against my better judgment, I said yes. I set strict rules for myself. The meet was on the 10th of November, a Saturday, at 4 in the afternoon, in a public place. I told my best friend Sophie everything: Ryan's name, the cafe's address, and a plan to text her every 30 minutes. If I didn't, she'd call the police. I wore jeans and a green sweater, my hair tied back, aiming to look casual but not inviting. When I arrived at the Brewhaven, the cafe was busy, filled with the hum of chatter and the smell of roasted beans. Ryan was already there, sitting by a window, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, just like his photo. He waved, his smile nervous but warm, and I relaxed a bit, sliding into the seat across from him. He seemed normal, maybe a little awkward, talking about his job fixing cars and his favorite trails around Laurelton. I sipped my latte, nodding along, but something felt off. His eyes darted to the door every few minutes, like he was expecting someone else. The date was fine, if uneventful. Ryan was polite but dull, his stories trailing off into silence, and I realized there was no spark. After an hour, I thanked him, said I had to go, and left, texting Sophie that I was all good. I walked to my car, parked 2 blocks away in a lot by the library, the evening air crisp with the promise of winter. As I unlocked my door, a prickle ran down my neck, like I was being watched. I glanced around, but the lot was empty, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I shook it off, blaming nerves, and drove home to my apartment on Maple Street, a second-floor unit with big windows overlooking a quiet park. That night, around 11, my phone buzzed with an email from Ryan. He thanked me for the date, said he'd love to see me again, and asked if I was free the next weekend. I hesitated, not wanting to ghost him but certain I wasn't interested. I replied politely, saying I was busy and didn't think we were a match, wishing him luck. His response came minutes later, short and cold. "You'll change your mind." My stomach twisted, but I ignored it, assuming he was just hurt. I locked my doors, checked the windows, and went to bed, the park outside dark and still. The next morning, the 11th of November, I woke to another email from Ryan. This one longer, angrier. He called me shallow, said I'd let him on, and claimed he'd seen me flirting with a guy as I left the cafe. A total lie. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I didn't reply, hoping silence would end it. But by noon, my phone pinged again. Another email, this time with a photo attached, a blurry shot of me walking to my car in the library lot, my green sweater unmistakable. My heart stopped. He'd followed me, watched me, maybe stood just out of sight as I'd felt that prickle. The email read, "I know where you park. I know where you live." My hands shook as I blocked his email, but the damage was done. He'd been close enough to photograph me, close enough to follow me home. I called Sophie, my voice trembling, and she rushed over. We checked the park from my window, scanning for any sign of him, but saw nothing unusual, just joggers and dog walkers. Sophie urged me to call the police, but I hesitated, unsure if a photo and some emails were enough. Instead, I emailed Craigslist to report his ad, though I doubted they'd do anything. That evening, I parked my car in a different lot, a gated one near my building, and double-checked my locks, the photo burning in my mind. Sleep came fitfully, broken by every creak in the old building, each one sounding like footsteps on the stairs. On the 12th of November, things escalated. I was working from home, editing a paper, when a new email landed in my inbox from a different address, but signed Ryan. It described my apartment building in detail. The red brick, the ivy climbing the walls, the park across the street. He mentioned seeing me at my window that morning, said I looked lonely. My blood ran cold. I'd been at my window, sipping coffee, unaware of eyes on me. The email ended with a threat. "You can't hide from me." I called the police this time, my voice shaking as I showed them the emails and photo. They took a report, promising to patrol the area, but said there wasn't enough to track him down without a last name or address. They suggested I stay somewhere else, and I packed a bag, crashing at Sophie's place that night. For 2 days, I stayed away, but I had to return on the 15th of November to grab clothes and my laptop. Sophie came with me, her presence a small comfort. As we approached my door, I froze. A small envelope was taped to it, my name scrawled in jagged handwriting. Inside was a folded sketch, crude but clear. Me standing at my window, my face drawn with eerie precision. My knees buckled. He'd been here, close enough to touch my door. Sophie grabbed the envelope and called the police again, who dusted it for prints, but found nothing usable. They escorted us out, their faces grim, and I knew I couldn't stay in Laurelton. I moved out a week later, on the 22nd of November, breaking my lease and relocating to a new city 2 hours away. I deleted my email account, changed my number, and swore off sites like Craigslist. The police never found Ryan, if that was even his name. Your ghost stories, like the shadow on Fog Harbor's pier, capture that same dread, the feeling of being hunted by someone who knows too much. I still check my rearview mirror, half expecting to see his face, and I wonder if he's out there, watching someone else's window, waiting for them to change their mind. I'm a 26-year-old woman working the night shift at a 24-hour pharmacy in the quiet town of Eldridge, nestled in a valley surrounded by low hills. The pharmacy, called Valley Meds, sits on the edge of Main Street, its neon sign casting a faint glow over a parking lot that's nearly empty after midnight. I'm a cashier, scanning prescriptions and snacks for the occasional truck driver or insomniac, my hours stretching from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I live alone in a small apartment 3 blocks away, close enough to walk home, which I liked at first. It saved gas and cleared my head after long shifts. But on the 15th of February, that short walk became a gauntlet of fear when I realized someone was following me. It started subtly. I was restocking shelves around 2 in the morning, the pharmacy quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. A man came in, maybe in his 30s, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, his face half hidden by the hood's shadow. He wandered the aisles, picking up random items, a pack of gum, a bottle of soda before approaching my register. His eyes were pale, almost gray, and they lingered on me longer than felt normal, studying my name tag pinned to my blue vest. He didn't smile, didn't chat, just paid in cash and left, his footsteps fading into the night. I shrugged it off. Night shifts attract odd types, and I dealt with plenty of silent customers before. But he came back the next night, the 16th of February, same time, same hoodie. This time, he bought a single candy bar, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me the money. His touch was cold, deliberate, and those gray eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, as he muttered my name under his breath, like he was tasting it. My skin prickled, but I kept my face neutral, bagging his item and watching him leave. The parking lot was empty, the street beyond swallowed by darkness, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air seeping through the doors. I told my coworker, Sam, a stocky pharmacist who worked nights too, and he laughed, saying some guys just act weird around pretty cashiers. I forced a smile, but my gut told me this was different. By the third night, the 17th of February, I was on edge. When the man appeared again, my stomach twisted. He didn't browse this time, just walked straight to my register with a bottle of water, his hood up, his eyes boring into me. He leaned close enough for me to smell the stale cigarette smoke on his clothes, and whispered that he liked my hair down, the way it looked free. I'd worn it in a ponytail all shift, only letting it loose minutes before to rub my scalp. My breath caught. Had he seen me through the glass doors, adjusting my hair in the break room's mirror? I rang him up quickly, my hands trembling, and he left without another word. but his presence lingered, heavy and suffocating. I started noticing things after that. On the 18th of February, as I walked home at 6 in the morning, the streets gray with dawn, I felt eyes on me. The sidewalks of Eldridge are wide, lined with old maples, but that morning they felt narrow, exposed. I glanced back, expecting nothing, but saw a figure far down the block, too distant to make out, moving in my direction. I quickened my pace, my sneakers scuffing the pavement, and turned onto my street, my apartment's brick facade a welcome sight. When I looked again, the figure was gone, but my pulse didn't slow until I'd locked my door. The deadbolts click a lifeline. The next night, the 19th of February, I asked Sam to watch the register while I took my break outside, needing air to calm my nerves. I stood by the dumpster behind the pharmacy, hidden from the lot, scrolling my phone. A faint shuffle broke my focus, someone moving in the alley across the street, or a shuttered hardware store cast deep shadows. I squinted, my heart thudding, and saw him, the man, his hoodie unmistakable, standing under a broken streetlight, staring at me. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched, his face a smudge in the dark. I bolted inside, my breath ragged, and told Sam everything. He checked the alley with a flashlight, but no one was there, just empty crates and a stray cat. Sam offered to walk me home from then on, and I agreed, grateful but shaken. On the 20th of February, I bought a small canister of pepper spray, keeping it in my pocket during shifts. The man didn't show at the pharmacy, and I dared to hope he'd moved on. But as Sam and I walked home at dawn, the air sharp with frost, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. Tucked into my apartment's mailbox slot was a folded note, my name scrawled in jagged letters. I opened it with trembling fingers, Sam hovering close. Inside was a crude drawing of me, my face, my loose hair, my blue vest sketched in pencil, with words scratched beneath. I see you every night. My knees buckled. He'd been here, at my home, close enough to touch my mailbox. Sam called the police, his voice steady where mine would have cracked. The officer who came was kind but skeptical, saying a note and a few visits weren't enough for an arrest without a name or clear threat. She took the drawing, suggested I vary my routine, and promised extra patrols. I installed a cheap security camera above my door, its red light a small comfort, but sleep became a stranger. Every night at work, I scanned the aisles, expecting his gray eyes. Every walk home, I gripped the pepper spray, jumping at shadows. On the 25th of February, the camera caught something, a blurry figure lingering by my mailbox at 3 in the morning. Hoodie up, head bowed. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to push me over the edge. I quit my job on the 1st of March, unable to face another night under his gaze. I moved to a new town, 50 miles away, renting a basement unit with barred windows. The police never found him, and the pharmacy's cameras were too grainy to help. Your Fog Harbor ghost stories, with their shadowy figures lurking just out of sight, captured the dread I felt knowing he was there, watching, but never close enough to catch. I still check my locks, my pepper spray always in reach, and I wonder if he's still in Eldridge, waiting for another woman to walk home alone. I'm a 23-year-old woman, living in the bustling city of Portview, where I work as a cashier at a grocery store. To save money, I take the bus to work, a 30-minute ride through the city's heart, past neon-lit shops and quiet parks. My routine is predictable. Catch the 7 in the morning bus to my shift, then the 6 in the evening bus home to my apartment on Cedar Street. The Portview Bus Depot is a sprawling hub, always busy with travelers, its air thick with diesel and coffee. At its center is a small kiosk selling newspapers, snacks, and trinkets, manned by a rotating cast of workers. On the 5th of July, one of those workers, a man I'd never noticed before, turned my daily commute into a chilling ordeal. It was a warm morning, the sun already high as I stepped off the bus at the depot, my sneakers sticking slightly to the pavement. I had 10 minutes before my shift, so I headed to the kiosk for a bottle of water, my purse slung over my shoulder. The man behind the counter was in his 40s, wiry, with thinning hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. His name tag read Vince, and he smiled as I approached, but it wasn't friendly, more like a smirk, like he knew something I didn't. I asked for water, keeping my tone polite, but clipped, and he handed me the bottle, his fingers grazing mine longer than necessary. His eyes locked onto my purse, then flicked to my face, lingering on my lips. I felt a prickle of unease, paid quickly, and left, his gaze heavy on my back as I hurried to the store. That evening, after my shift, I was back at the depot, waiting for the 6 o'clock bus. The crowd was thinner now, the depot's lights casting long shadows across the concrete. I stood near the kiosk, scrolling my phone, when I felt that same prickle again. Glancing up, I saw Vince, still behind the counter, staring at me. Not casually, not distractedly. His eyes were fixed, unblinking, like a predator sizing up prey. My stomach twisted, but I told myself I was imagining things. Bus depots attract all types, right? I moved to the other side of the platform, putting a row of benches between us. But when I looked again, he was still watching, his smirk sharper now, almost daring me to react. The next day, the 6th of July, it happened again. I didn't need anything from the kiosk, so I avoided it, grabbing coffee from a vending machine instead. But as I boarded my morning bus, I caught Vince's eye through the crowd, his head tilted, tracking me like I was the only person in the depot. That evening, he was there again, leaning against the kiosk's counter, his arms crossed, staring as I waited for my bus. The depot felt smaller, the air thicker, his presence a weight I couldn't shake. I started noticing him every day, morning and evening, always at the kiosk, always watching. He never approached, never spoke, but his eyes followed me, cold and relentless, like he was memorizing my every move. By the 10th of July, my nerves were frayed. I varied my routine, taking an earlier bus at 5:30 in the evening, hoping to throw him off. But when I reached the depot, there he was, already at the kiosk, his smirk waiting like he'd known I'd change my schedule. The crowd didn't matter, families, commuters, students, they were all just noise to him. His focus was me, his eyes cutting through the chaos, finding me no matter where I stood. I stopped going near the kiosk, keeping to the depot's edges, but it made no difference. He'd shift his position, leaning out to keep me in sight, his gaze a silent claim on my space. On the 12th of July, things escalated. I was waiting for my evening bus, the depot quieter than usual, the summer heat lingering in the air. I stood by a pillar, texting my roommate, Tara, to distract myself. A shadow moved in my peripheral vision, and I looked up to see Vince, not at the kiosk, but closer, standing by a trash can 10 feet away, his eyes locked on me. He wasn't working, wasn't even pretending, to just staring, his hands in his pockets, his smirk gone, replaced by something darker, hungrier. My heart raced, and I gripped my phone, ready to call Tara, but my bus pulled up. I boarded, my legs shaky, and as we drove away, I saw him step back to the kiosk, his head tilted, watching until I was out of sight. The next morning, the 13th of July, I found something that turned my unease into fear. Tucked into my purse's outer pocket was a folded piece of paper, unnoticed until I reached for my bus pass. It was a receipt from the kiosk, dated the 5th of July, my first encounter with Vince. Scrawled across it in red ink was a single word, "Mine." My breath caught. I hadn't bought anything from him since that water, and I always zipped my purse. He'd gotten close enough to slip it inside, maybe while I waited for a bus, maybe when I turned away. The depot's crowds, once a comfort, now felt like a mask he hid behind, his hands unseen in the chaos. I called the depot's management that day, my voice trembling as I explained Vince's staring, the receipt, the word. The manager sounded bored, saying they'd look into it, but warned the kiosks were leased to third parties, so their control was limited. I asked about cameras, but she said they only covered entrances, not the kiosk itself. Frustrated, I told Tara everything, and she insisted I stop taking the bus alone. She started driving me to work, her car a lifeline, but I still had to cross the depot to reach the store. On the 15th of July, I saw Vince one last time. He was at the kiosk, his eyes finding me as I hurried through, but something was different. His smirk was gone, his face blank like he'd been caught. I didn't look back, my pulse loud in my ears, Tara's car waiting beyond the glass doors. I quit my job on the 20th of July, unable to face the depot anymore. I found work at a bookstore closer to home, where I don't need the bus. The police couldn't do much without proof, and the receipt wasn't enough. They said it could have been anyone's. Your Fog Harbor ghost stories, with their shadows lurking in plain sight, echo the dread I felt, knowing Vince was there, claiming me with every glance. I still check my purse for strange papers, my heart skipping at every unfamiliar face in a crowd, wondering if he's out there, waiting for me to step back into his line of sight. I'm a 28-year-old woman living in the small town of Clearwater, where I work as a graphic designer from my home office. My parents live 2 hours away in the city of Riverton, and I visit them often, driving my reliable sedan along Highway 17, a lonely stretch of road that cuts through fields and patches of forest. The highway is quiet at night, with few cars and fewer lights, just the occasional gas station or mile marker breaking the darkness. On the 20th of March, I left Riverton later than planned, around 10 at night, after a long dinner with my folks. What should have been a routine drive turned into a nightmare when I encountered a man who wasn't what he seemed. The night was cool, the air heavy with the scent of rain that never came. I was about 30 minutes from Clearwater, cruising at a steady 60 miles an hour, my headlights slicing through the dark. The radio played softly, a mix of old rock songs, and I was lost in thought, replaying conversations from dinner. Then, flashing lights filled my rear-view mirror red and blue, sharp and insistent. My stomach dropped. I hadn't been speeding, hadn't swerved, but I slowed down, pulling onto the gravel shoulder, my tires crunching against the uneven ground. The vehicle behind me was a dark SUV, its grille wide and menacing, with a light bar on top, pulsing like a heartbeat. I assumed it was a cop, maybe a highway patrol officer, though the SUV looked newer than the usual sedans I'd seen. I turned off the radio, my hands sweaty on the wheel, and waited, my heart beating faster than it should have. I'd never been pulled over before, and the isolation of Highway 17 made the moment feel heavier, the fields around me swallowing any sense of safety. The driver's door of the SUV opened, and a man stepped out, his silhouette tall and broad against the flashing lights. He wore a dark uniform, a badge glinting on his chest, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he approached, his flashlight beam swung across my car, blinding me for a moment before settling on my window. I rolled it down halfway, my license and registration already in hand, trying to stay calm. He stood close, too close, his body blocking the window's frame. The flashlight stayed on my face, making it hard to see his. His voice was gruff, asking for my documents, but there was an edge to it, like he was performing a role he hadn't rehearsed. I handed over my license, explaining I was just heading home from Riverton, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't look at the papers, just kept the light on me, his breathing heavy, audible over the hum of his SUV's engine. He asked where I lived, what I did for work, questions that felt more personal than procedural. My unease grew, a knot tightening in my chest. I glanced at his badge, expecting a name or number, but it was blank, just a cheap-looking star that caught the light oddly. The highway was empty, no other cars in sight, the forest on one side and fields on the other closing in like walls. He stepped back, telling me to get out of the car, saying he needed to check something. My pulse spiked. I'd read about traffic stops, watched enough news to know you don't have to exit unless there's a clear reason. I asked why, keeping my tone polite, but my hands gripped the wheel harder. His face shifted, the flashlight dropping slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his eyes narrow, glinting with something I couldn't name, like impatience mixed with hunger. He repeated the order, sharper now, his hand resting on his belt, where I expected a holster but saw only a bulky shape, maybe a tool, maybe worse. Every instinct screamed to stay put. I told him I'd wait for another officer, my voice trembling but firm, and reached for my phone in the center console. His hand shot forward, slamming against the window frame, startling me so badly I dropped the phone. He leaned in, his breath fogging the glass, and said I was making a mistake, that I'd regret not cooperating. My heart pounded, my mind racing through options: drive off, call for help, scream, but the highway's emptiness trapped me. Then, headlights appeared in the distance, a semi-truck rumbling toward us. The man froze, his head snapping toward the approaching lights. Without a word, he backed away, climbed into his SUV, and peeled onto the highway, his taillights vanishing as the truck roared past. I sat there, shaking, my phone still on the floor. I locked my doors, grabbed the phone, and dialed the police, my fingers fumbling. The dispatcher listened as I described the stop, the man, the blank badge, my voice breaking as I realized how close I'd come to something awful. They sent a real patrol car, and the officer, a woman with a calm voice, met me at a gas station 10 miles up the road. She confirmed no highway patrol units were in the area, no SUVs like I'd described. My license was still in my car, untouched, proof he'd never intended to process it. The police searched but found no trace of him, no record of a stop, just my word against the might. I drove home, checking my rear view mirror every second, the highway stretching like a threat. The next day, the 21st of March, I called Riverton's police again, learning about cases of imposters on rural roads, men posing as cops to lure women alone. The thought chilled me. He'd known I was vulnerable, picked a spot where help was miles away. Your Fog Harbor ghost stories, with their shadows waiting in the mist, capture that same dread, the feeling of being hunted by something that blends into the ordinary. I avoid Highway 17 now, taking longer routes, my doors locked tight. I still see his eyes in my dreams, glinting under that hat, and I wonder if he's out there, waiting for another car to pull over. I'm a woman in my mid-30s, reflecting on a chilling memory from when I was 11, living in the small town of Pinewood, nestled in the hills of Northern California. My family, mom, my younger brother, Timmy, and me lived in a modest house on Sycamore Lane, a quiet street where kids rode bikes until dusk. My mom had recently married Frank, a gruff man in his late 50s who'd moved in with us, bringing a heavy presence that shifted the air in our home. Frank wasn't my dad. My real father had passed years earlier, but he tried to act like one, his attempts clumsy and forced. By the summer of 1999, his behavior toward me grew unsettling, turning our cozy house into a place where shadows seemed to linger. It started on the 10th of June, a warm evening when fireflies blinked in the backyard. Mom was working late at the diner, and Timmy was at a sleepover, leaving me alone with Frank. I was in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a comic book, the windows open to catch the breeze. Frank sat in his recliner, sipping a beer, his eyes flicking to me more often than the TV. The way he watched felt different, not parental, not kind, but sharp, like he was studying me. I shifted uncomfortably, pulling my knees up, and he smiled, a slow, crooked thing that made my stomach twist. He got up, his boots heavy on the hardwood, and stood too close, looming over me. He asked if I wanted to play a game, his voice low, almost secretive. I mumbled that I was tired and bolted to my room, locking the door, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't name. The next week, his attention grew bolder. On the 15th of June, I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich when Frank came in, leaning against the counter, his arm brushing mine as he reached for a glass. His touch lingered, deliberate, and he chuckled when I flinched, saying I was growing up fast. His eyes traced me, not like a stepdad checking on his kid, but like a stranger sizing up something he wanted. I grabbed my sandwich and hurried to my room, the lock's click my only defense. That night, I heard footsteps outside my door, slow and heavy, pausing for long seconds before moving away. I lay awake, clutching my pillow. The house's familiar creaks, now threats I couldn't ignore. By the 20th of June, Frank's behavior was impossible to dismiss. He started finding excuses to be near me, offering to drive me to the library, lingering when I did chores, his hand grazing my shoulder or back when Mom wasn't looking. Each touch was quick, easy to mistake for an accident, but they left my skin crawling. He'd stare when I swam in our backyard pool, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses, but I felt their weight, like fingers pressing into me. Mom was too tired to notice, her shifts at the diner draining her, and Timmy was too young, caught up in his own world. I felt alone, trapped in a house where Frank's presence was a growing shadow. The worst came on the 25th of June, a muggy night when the air felt thick with secrets. Mom was at work, Timmy at another sleepover, and I was in my room, reading by a small lamp, my window cracked to let in the breeze. Frank knocked, his voice muffled, asking if I needed anything. I said no, keeping my eyes on my book, but the door handle jiggled as if he was testing it. My lock held, but my pulse spiked, the room suddenly too small. Minutes later, I heard the back door open, then close, followed by a faint rustling in the backyard. I crept to my window, easing the curtain aside, and froze. Frank stood by the pool, motionless, staring up at my window. The moonlight caught his face, his expression blank but intense, like he was waiting for me to appear. In his hand was a small object, a camera, its lens glinting faintly. My breath caught, my body rooted in place. He didn't move, just stood there, his gaze locked on my window, the camera dangling at his side. I dropped the curtain and backed away, my hands trembling as I checked the lock again. The house was silent, but I felt him out there, his presence seeping through the walls. I turned off my lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and sat against my bed, listening for any sign he'd come closer. Hours passed before I heard the back door again, then his heavy steps inside, fading to his room. I didn't sleep, my mind racing with what that camera meant, what he might have captured or planned to. The next morning, the 26th of June, I found a Polaroid tucked under my door, a blurry shot of the pool at night, my window faintly visible, a smudge of light where I'd stood. My heart pounded as I tore it up, flushing the pieces down the toilet, terrified Mom would see. I wanted to tell her, but Frank's charm around her made me doubt myself. Would she believe me, or think I was exaggerating? I started avoiding him, staying at friends' houses, biking to the library for hours. But Pinewood was small, and home was unavoidable. Every night, I checked my window, my door. The Polaroid's image burned into my mind, like the ghostly figures in your Fog Harbor stories, lurking just out of reach but never gone. On the 1st of July, I caught Frank in a lie that broke the spell. He told Mom he was fixing the pool pump, but I saw him by my window's exterior, adjusting something, a small hole in the screen I hadn't noticed before. My stomach churned, realizing he'd been planning, watching, maybe more. I told Mom everything that night, my voice shaking, showing her the torn Polaroid I'd kept one piece of. Her face crumpled, and she confronted Frank, her screams echoing through the house. He denied it, his voice smooth, but Mom kicked him out, his bags on the lawn by dawn. We changed the locks, and Mom filed for divorce, her trust in him shattered. Frank left Pinewood, and we never saw him again, but the fear he planted lingered. I checked my windows for years, certain his eyes were still out there, camera in hand. The police found nothing when they searched his things. No photos, no proof, but I know what I saw. Your ghost stories, with their unseen threats, echo that dread. The feeling of being watched by someone who's already too close. Even now, I lock every door, wondering if Frank's still out there, waiting for another window to peer through. I'm a woman in my late 20s, living in the quiet town of Holleridge, where I rent a small house on Elmwood Drive. The street is lined with old oaks, their branches casting long shadows at night. And my place is a cozy single story with a wraparound porch, perfect for my solitary life as a freelance writer. The house has big windows that let in the morning sun, but at night, they turn into dark mirrors, reflecting my every move. I've always been cautious locking doors, closing blinds, but Holleridge felt safe, a place where nothing bad happened. That changed on the 5th of September, when a single moment turned my home into a cage of fear. It was around 10 at night, a cool breeze carrying the scent of autumn leaves. I was in my living room, typing a blog post, my laptop's glow the only light in the house. My dog, a scruffy terrier named Milo, was curled up on the couch, snoring softly. I'd left the kitchen window open an inch, its screen intact, to air out the smell of burnt toast from dinner. As I worked, a strange sensation crept over me, like the air had thickened. Milo's ears twitched, and he lifted his head, staring at the kitchen doorway, his body tense. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys, and listened. The house was silent, but the silence felt wrong, heavy, like it was hiding something. I stood, stretching my stiff legs, and walked to the kitchen to close the window, Milo trailing close. The linoleum was cold under my bare feet, and as I reached for the window, I froze. A face pressed against the screen, a man's face, pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight at me. His nose was mashed against the mesh, distorting his features, and his lips curled into a thin, unnatural smile, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I stumbled back, my hip hitting the counter. Milo growled, low and fierce, his fur bristling as he lunged toward the window. The man didn't move, didn't flinch, just kept staring, his eyes locked on mine, the screen warping his face into something almost inhuman. I grabbed a knife from the block, my hand shaking, and yelled for him to get away, my voice cracking with panic. At that, his smile widened and he tilted his head, slow and deliberate, like a predator sizing me up. Then he backed away, melting into the darkness beyond the porch, his footsteps silent on the grass. I slammed the window shut, locked it, and ran to check every door, Milo barking wildly now, his claws skittering on the floor. The blinds were up in the living room, and I yanked them down, my breath ragged, terrified he was still out there, watching. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained what I'd seen. They arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers with flashlights, their faces calm but serious. They searched the yard, the porch, even the alley behind Elmwood Drive, but found nothing, no footprints, no signs of tampering, just the screen's faint smudge where his face had pressed. They asked if I'd seen him before, if I had enemies, but I hadn't, and I didn't. They suggested it was a prank, maybe a drunk wandering from a bar, and promised to patrol the area. I nodded, clutching Milo, but their words felt hollow. That face wasn't a prank, it was deliberate, personal, like he'd chosen me. I barely slept that night. The knife on my nightstand, Milo pressed against my side. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves, sent my heart racing. The memory of his eyes burned into me. The next day, the 6th of September, I bought heavy curtains, covering every window, and installed a cheap security camera on the porch. The footage was grainy, but it caught something, a shadow moving across the lawn at 3 in the morning. Too vague to identify, but enough to make my skin crawl. I started locking the windows tight, the house stuffy and claustrophobic, but I couldn't shake the feeling he was still out there, waiting. On the 8th of September, it got worse. I was walking Milo at dusk, sticking to the sidewalk, when I felt that same heavy air again, like eyes boring into me. I glanced across the street, and there he was standing under an oak, half hidden by its trunk, his pale face unmistakable, that same thin smile curling his lips. He didn't move, just watched, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but menacing. Milo growled, straining at his leash, and I hurried home, my pulse loud in my ears. I checked the camera when I got inside, and it showed him crossing my lawn minutes later, pausing by the kitchen window, his head tilted as if listening. He didn't touch the glass, didn't try to enter, just stood there, then walked away, swallowed by the night. I called the police again, showing them the footage, but they couldn't do much. The image was too blurry for an ID, and he hadn't broken any laws. They increased patrols, but Holleridge is small, their resources thin. I stopped walking Milo after dark, stopped opening windows, my house a fortress that felt more like a trap. On the 10th of September, I found a scrap of paper slipped under my front door. Number writing, just a crude drawing of a face wide eyes, a twisted smile, like a child's sketch but sinister. My stomach lurched. He'd been on my porch, close enough to touch my door while I slept. The fear became unbearable, a weight that followed me everywhere, like the ghostly figures in your Fog Harbor stories, always lurking just out of sight. I moved out on the 15th of September, staying with a friend in a neighboring town, unable to spend another night in that house. The police never found him. No neighbors saw anything, and the camera caught no more shadows. I don't know who he was, a stranger, a drifter, or someone who knew my routines, but his face haunts me, those eyes waiting in every dark window. I live in an apartment now, high above the street, but I still check the locks, still see him in my dreams, smiling through the glass. I'm a 29-year-old woman, living alone in a 2-story duplex on Clover Street in the quiet town of Westmere. I work from home as a cup eater, my days spent in the soft glow of my laptop, the world outside a distant hum. My apartment is the lower unit, cozy with creaky floors and a small patio that faces a shared backyard. The upper unit was empty when I moved in last year, its silence a comfort, but on the 5th of January, a new tenant arrived, and my peaceful life unraveled into a maze of fear. His name was Leonard, a man in his 60s with stooped shoulders and a face carved by time. I met him once when he knocked to introduce himself, his handshake limp, his eyes darting past me into my apartment. He said he was retired, liked to keep to himself, and apologized for any noise from his heavy footsteps. I smiled, thinking nothing of it. But that night, the sounds began slow, deliberate pacing above my ceiling, back and forth, starting at midnight and lasting hours. The rhythm was unnatural, not the casual tread of someone restless, but measured, like a ritual. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart ticking in time with his steps, the darkness pressing against my windows. At first, I ignored it. Old houses creak, and Leonard was new, probably settling in. But the pacing never stopped, every night, always at midnight. On the 10th of January, I noticed something worse. My desk lamp flickered when he walked, its bulb buzzing faintly, as if his steps were tugging at the wiring. I checked the outlets, found nothing wrong, but the flickering persisted, syncing with his tread. I started sleeping with earplugs, but they couldn't block the unease creeping into my bones. The sense that his pacing wasn't aimless, that it was about me. On the 15th of January, I came home from the grocery store and found my patio door slightly ajar. The lock untouched, but the frame misaligned, like someone had pried it open. My stomach twisted. I lived alone, no roommates, no guests, and Westmere was too small for random break-ins. I searched the apartment, my kitchen knife in hand, but nothing was missing, no signs of theft, just the door's silent betrayal. That night, Leonard's pacing was louder, closer, as if he was standing directly above my living room. his steps heavy enough to shake the light fixture. I turned on every lamp, their glow a frail shield, and sat on the couch, listening, my pulse loud in my ears. The next morning, the 16th of January, I found a small mark on my patio, a chalk outline, crude and uneven, like a child's drawing of a footprint. It wasn't there the day before, and the backyard was gated, locked, accessible only to me and Leonard. My skin crawled as I scrubbed it away, the chalk smearing under my fingers, its grit lingering on my hands. I called the landlord, a tired man named Mr. Ellis, who said Leonard was harmless, just eccentric, and promised to check the door. He fixed the lock, but found no signs of tampering, leaving me with a pat on the shoulder and a suggestion to relax. I didn't. On the 20th of January, I installed a motion sensor camera on the patio, its lens trained on the backyard. That night, the pacing stopped abruptly at 1 a.m, replaced by a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from the kitchen window. I froze, my blanket pulled tight, and checked the camera feed on my phone. The backyard was empty, the gate closed, but the footage showed a shadow tall, stooped, moving along the fence, pausing where the chalk mark had been. My breath caught. It was Leonard's shape, unmistakable, his head tilted as if listening to my apartment. The tapping grew louder, insistent, and I clutched my phone, too scared to move, imagining his face pressed against the glass. The next day, the 21st of January, I confronted Leonard, knocking on his door with a courage I didn't feel. He answered slowly, his eyes sunken, his smile thin. I asked about the backyard, the mark, trying to sound casual, but his gaze sharpened, cutting through me. He said he hadn't been outside, claimed his knees were bad, and shut the door before I could press further. That night, the pacing resumed, but now it was different, faster, erratic, circling above my bedroom. The lamp flickered wildly, and when I checked the camera, I saw something that turned my blood cold. A hand, pale and veined, reaching from the backyard shadows, brushing the patio door's handle before retreating. I called the police on the 22nd of January, showing them the footage, my voice shaking. They searched Leonard's unit, but he was gone. No furniture, no clothes, just a bare apartment and a faint smell of damp earth. The landlord swore he'd seen Leonard that morning, but the police found no trace, no record of him beyond a cash deposit for rent. My camera caught one last image that night, a silhouette at the edge of the backyard, stooped. And still, watching my window as the pacing echoed in my head, though the upstairs was empty. I moved out on the 1st of February, unable to stay where his footsteps still lingered in my dreams. The police closed the case, calling it a vagrant's prank, but I know what I saw. Your Fog Harbor stories, with their unseen watchers, mirror the dread, the feeling of being studied by something that knows your every move. I live in a high-rise now, far from Westmere, but I check my cameras nightly, half expecting to see Leonard's shadow pacing just out of sight. I'm a 24-year-old man, working the closing shift at a convenience store called Quick Stop on the outskirts of Dunfield, a fading industrial town. The store sits alone on Route 12, a stretch of cracked asphalt flanked by empty lots and a shuttered factory, its windows dark as far as the eye can see. I've been here 6 months, manning the register from 4 in the afternoon to midnight, serving truckers, night owls, and the occasional teenager buying energy drinks. The job's dull but steady, and I'm used to the quiet, the fluorescent hum, my only company after 10. But on the 10th of April, a customer walked in who made me question what I saw in the store's mirrors and what saw me. It was a slow night, the air heavy with the threat of rain. I was sweeping the floor, the security mirrors above the aisles reflecting my every move, their convex curves warping the store into a maze of distorted shapes. Around 11, the bell above the door chimed, and a woman entered, mid-30s, pale, wearing a long gray coat that seemed too heavy for spring. Her hair was wet, though it hadn't rained, and her eyes scanned the store, avoiding mine. She moved to the back, near the coolers, her steps silent, almost gliding. I watched her in the mirror, a habit from catching shoplifters. But something about her reflection felt wrong. Her coat flickered, like a glitch, revealing a darker shape beneath. Too tall, too thin. I shook it off, blaming tired eyes, and returned to sweeping. She grabbed a soda and approached the register, her face blank, her hands trembling slightly as she handed me cash. Up close, her skin was clammy, her eyes sunken, and she smelled faintly of rust, like old pipes. I bagged her drink, my fingers brushing hers ice cold. Unnaturally so, and she left without a word, the door swinging shut behind her. I glanced at the mirror as she exited, and my breath caught. Her reflection lingered, standing by the coolers. Though she was gone, its head turned toward me, featureless except for two hollow spots where eyes should have been. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was a trick of the light, the mirror's curve playing games. I locked the front door at midnight, flipped the sign to closed, and started cleaning, my eyes darting to the mirrors despite myself. The store felt smaller, the aisles tighter, the hum of the lights louder, like a warning. As I mopped near the coolers, I noticed a wet footprint on the tile, long and narrow, leading nowhere, as if someone had stood there and vanished. My skin prickled, and I hurried to finish, eager to leave, the reflection's hollow gaze etched in my mind. The next night, the 11th of April, she came back. Same time, same coat, same silent glide to the coolers. I watched her in the mirror, my heart thudding, and saw it again. The flicker, the tall, thin shape beneath her coat, moving slightly out of sync, like a shadow with its own will. She bought another soda, her fingers colder this time, lingering on mine, her eyes searching my face as if memorizing it. When she left, I checked the mirror, dreading what I'd see. Her reflection stayed, closer now, by the chip aisle, its hollow eyes fixed on me, its form stretching taller, thinner, until the mirror's edge cut it off. I started avoiding the mirrors, keeping my head down, but the store's layout made it impossible. They hung above every aisle, their warped surfaces catching me at every turn. On the 12th of April, I found another footprint, this one near the register, smeared, like someone had dragged their foot. I told my boss, a gruff man named Carl, but he laughed, saying the store was old, the mirrors cheap, and I was working too many nights. I didn't argue, but I bought a small flashlight, keeping it in my pocket, its beam a comfort against the store's growing menace. On the 15th of April, the air felt charged, the lights buzzing louder. She came in at 11, her coat dripping wet, though the sky was clear. She didn't go to the coolers, just stood by the entrance, staring at me, her eyes blacker, deeper, like wells with no bottom. I rang up her soda, my hand shaking, and noticed her reflection wasn't with her, it was behind me. In the mirror above the counter, its hollow face inches from my shoulder, its shape no longer human, but jagged like broken glass. I dropped her change, my voice gone, and she smiled, a slow, knowing curl that chilled my blood. She left, but the reflection didn't, its presence heavy, watching as I locked up, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I quit on the 16th of April, unable to face another shift. Carl didn't care, hiring a kid to replace me the next day. I drive a different route now, avoiding Route 12, but I can't escape the mirrors in my apartment. Their surfaces too clear, too watchful. Your fog-harbored tailies, with their lurking shadows, echo the dread I felt knowing something was there. Not human, not gone. I check my reflections daily, half expecting to see her shape, those hollow eyes waiting for me to look back. I'm a 31-year-old man, living with my girlfriend Sarah, in a century-old house we bought on Maplewood Lane in the rural town of Stillbrook. The house was a fixer-upper, its gabled roof and wraparound porch charming despite the peeling paint and sagging floors. We moved in on the 1st of August, excited to make it ours. But the attic, a cramped space above the second floor, gave me pause from the start. Its trapdoor heavy, its air stale. On the 10th of August, a light began shining from that attic, and our dream home became a place where darkness held secrets I couldn't explain. We'd been working hard, painting walls and sanding floors, the house alive with our laughter. The attic was off limits for now, too cluttered with old boxes and dusty beams to tackle yet. One night, after a long day, we were in bed, the windows open to the summer hum of crickets. Around midnight, I woke to a faint glow seeping through the bedroom door, warm and flickering, like candlelight. I thought Sarah had left a lamp on, but the hallway was dark, the light coming from the ceiling, where the attic trapdoor sat. A thin line of yellow spilled around its edges, steady, impossible. We hadn't wired the attic yet. There was no electricity up there. No bulbs, no reason for light. I nudged Sarah, my voice low, asking if she saw it too. Her eyes widened, reflecting the glow, and we stared at the trapdoor, our breaths shallow. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands unsteady, and climbed the stepladder, the wood creaking under my weight. The trapdoor was locked, its bolt rusted but firm, untouched since we'd moved in. The light pulsed faintly, as if breathing, and I felt a pull, like it wanted me to open it. Sarah grabbed my arm, her face pale, begging me to wait until morning. I agreed, my gut twisting, and we slept downstairs, the couch a frail refuge, the glow haunting my closed eyes. The next morning, the 11th of August, the light was gone. I checked the attic, forcing the trapdoor open with a crowbar, its hinges groaning. The space was empty, except for cobwebs and a few broken crates, the air thick with dust. No bulbs, no wires, no candles, nothing to explain the glow. I told myself it was a reflection, maybe headlights from the road. The Maplewood Lane is a dead end, the nearest neighbor a mile away. That night, the light returned, brighter, spilling down the hallway, casting shadows that moved when I didn't. Sarah refused to sleep upstairs, and we camped in the living room, her hand clutching mine, the house no longer ours. On the 13th of August, I found something in the attic, a small tin box, tucked behind a beam, its lid etched with strange symbols, like scratches from a desperate hand. Inside was a locket, its chain tarnished, holding a faded photo of a woman, her eyes hollow, her smile forced. My skin crawled, but I kept it from Sarah, hiding the box in my toolbox, afraid it meant something worse. The light grew stronger each night, its glow now reaching the stairs, accompanied by a faint hum, like a voice too soft to hear. I started dreaming of the woman, her face at the trapdoor, her fingers clawing at the wood, her eyes begging me to let her out. On the 15th of August, I woke to the trapdoor open, its ladder extended, the light blinding, pouring down like liquid fire. Sarah was asleep, oblivious, but I climbed, my flashlight useless against the glow. At the attic's edge, I saw her, the woman from the locket, translucent, her dress tattered, her eyes locked on mine. She reached for me, her touch cold, pulling me toward the light, her hum now a whisper, urging me to stay. I stumbled back, falling down the ladder, my ankle twisting as I hit the floor. The trapdoor slammed shut, the light gone, the house silent except for my ragged breaths. We moved out on the 20th of August, leaving the house to rot, its secrets too heavy to carry. The realtor found no record of the woman, no history of the locket, but I know she's there, waiting. Your Fog Harbor stories, with their ghostly presences, capture that dread, the sense of something ancient watching, claiming you. I check ceilings now, even in our new apartment, half expecting that glow, her face, calling me back to the attic's light.